Right, I think we'll get going. Hello and welcome everyone to today's book club event from Restless Events. I'm Aideen Clarke and I work at Restless. And today I'm delighted to be joined by author Berit Lewis to celebrate the launch of her new book, Aging Upwards, which has already hit the bestseller list on Amazon. What an amazing achievement. Over the next hour, please feel free to post your questions for Berit in the chat function on the bottom of your screen, and we will cover as many as we can throughout the event, and there will be time at the end for questions and comments too. In Aging Upwards, Berit challenges the old story about life being all downhill from 50. Combining her extensive experience in teaching mindfulness with her knowledge of how to live and age well, she argues that we should stop resisting aging. Instead, we can learn to embrace all of life's pleasures as well as pain, and thereby gain a much richer, more resilient and thriving later life. Berit currently lives in the Netherlands and is the owner of Thriving Life, offering talks, workshops, courses and retreats in mental well-being for individuals and for workplaces. As well as being an experienced and accredited mindfulness teacher, she holds a BA in psychology, an MSc in vitality and aging, and an MA in communication, and has carried out research into mindfulness-based vitality and aging. Aging Upwards has been described as the antidote to all the anti-aging messaging we're bombarded with by Catherine Garrod, the author of Conscious Inclusion, and as a compulsory reading for healthcare professionals by Julia Headstra, Chief Information Officer of Amstel and Zorg. Thank you so much for joining us, Berit. It's such an honor to have you with us this evening, and congratulations on your new book, which I'm enjoying very much. I have a copy here on the table beside me. It would be great if you could start by telling us a bit about your own life and what originally got you interested in mindfulness and aging.
So thank you so much for being here. It's overwhelming to see all these people here. That was so beautiful. Thank you all for joining. Yes. So how did I get into mindfulness? Well, I think it really starts 14 years ago, when I was living in Denmark at the time, and I had 2 young children, and my husband was offered a job in the Netherlands, and we decided to move here because, you know, like normal young families today, you have so much stress, 2 career jobs. We never saw our children. And we decided to make the move, and I gave up my job and I got here. And at the beginning, it was great. But then after a while, I was like, wow, what have I done? Like, I realized how closely attached I was to my job. And that was my identity. And I felt reduced to being a housewife or a mother. And that was somehow not enough for me. So, but I changed things around and I thought, okay, what can I make of this? And so I went back to university and I studied psychology. But at the same time, I also always had this interest in yoga and in mindfulness, although I didn't really know what it was at the time. I thought that mindfulness was just this, you know, you have this switch in the back of your head and you could just switch it off and everything is just calm in there and you don't have to listen to all these thoughts. But of course, it doesn't work like that. So what I did was I went on a silent retreat to Gaia House in Devon in England for 5 days. And I had never meditated before, or I knew hardly anything about mindfulness. And on the second day, the teacher there said to us, I bet you're all struggling right now with some kind of physical pain. And I had really bad backache. And she said to us, you now have 2 options. You can either change the situation, so you can maybe try and sit in a different way, or you can change the way you approach the pain, the difficulty. And so I did. I first tried to sit in a different way. That didn't really work. And then I tried the other one. So instead of that initial thought I had, this is pain, this is something I don't want, this is bad, go away. And all my thoughts were around that initially, you know, you were supposed to focus on your breath, and then I had pain. So it was like, oh God, this pain is killing me. No, back to the breath, and then the pain. But what I did was I went beyond that, and I said, okay, so what is it actually, this pain? How does it feel like? Is it moving? Does it have a temperature? Does it have a color, a texture? And then once I went beyond that label of pain, don't want it, I could sort of deal with it in a different way. So the pain was still there, and it was there throughout the whole retreat. But I learned that I could step back and not let it completely overtake everything that was happening in my mind and in my body. And I could see that there were other things happening at the same time. There was also sunshine that was warming my body, or a nice peaceful atmosphere, and so on. So I could have the pain as well as the other things in life. So I got out of that retreat and I was like, wow, this is just fantastic, because this is a superpower. And all these things that I had learned in my psychology degree, you know, to challenge our thoughts and saying you are not your thoughts, I could actually feel it on my body. It was a physical, I could step back and see my thoughts coming and going, and I could see the pain, and I could feel it for what it was, instead of letting it be taken over by thoughts and emotions. And so that's how I got into to mindfulness. And I started to teach that to private people and to corporations, and did that for some years. And then COVID happened, and all my jobs were cancelled. And I was like, okay, so what do I do now? And being a person, a Dane living in the Netherlands with a Welsh husband, 2 children that goes to an American school, it was, at our dinner table, we always talked about what's a good life, where do we want to live, where's a good place to live. So I thought, okay, let's take this opportunity to write that book that I always wanted to write. And so I looked around me, because I'm relatively young, I can say that. I'm just turned 50 last year. So I needed to talk to people who were older than me, and I needed to talk to people who had an academic background in aging as well. So I found around the corner here in the Netherlands, there's a university at Leiden University, and they have a master in vitality and aging. And originally I thought I was going to interview them, but then I thought, hey, why not do that? Why not do the degree? It's only 1 year. So that's what I did during COVID. And as part of that, I created and I taught online. And then I also did qualitative research to the participants that joined the course. And the course was about mindfully vitality and aging. So how can mindfulness help us cope with the challenges that comes with aging? And what I found was that these ladies, it was all women who signed up for some reason, they all came back to me and said that the mindfulness practice gave them this mental flexibility. So if something happened, if they realized they couldn't do the things they used to be able to do, instead of getting caught up in thoughts about, I wish it was like it used to be, or worries about the future, thinking, what will happen if this gets worse? Who's going to look after me? And all these extra sufferings that we tend to put on to ourselves when things go bad. So what it gave them was that they, instead of focusing on all these thoughts and getting caught up in that, they could say, okay, but what can I do? And they could sort of change their attitude or change their attention towards the things that they could still do, and the things that gave them meaning, and the things that was important to them. So they could, I like to say, they started to focus on what matters instead of what was the matter with them. And that's the same thing that I have been experiencing personally myself. So yeah, that was a long talk about where I'm here. So yeah, eventually...
No, but really interesting. And when you talk about mindfulness and your journey with mindfulness, what does your mindfulness practice look like on a daily basis?
Yeah, what does it look like? I always meditate every day. I meditate, but that can last anything from 5 minutes to 40 minutes, and sometimes longer. I go on silent retreats as well from time to time, and then it's like a whole day where you sit and meditate. But that's the meditation part of it. But the mindfulness is very much incorporated in my whole life. And sometimes it's hard to tell whether it's actually a meditation or it's just a pause where I just stop and tune in and feel how I feel and notice the thoughts that's going through my mind. So in that way, that's also, I think what it becomes when you do practice, it becomes a habit, and it's just a way of living eventually. And having said that, also, of course, I'm not mindful all the time. Of course, there's always things that I also get engaged in, and afterwards thinking, oh my God, why did I go there for so long and cause so much suffering for myself? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And in your book, you talk about embracing age instead of running away from it. And what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, because when I was doing my master, I was struck by how much literature, how much research there is about avoiding age. So a lot of books about age is really about avoiding age. Yeah. So it's about running away from being old. And I don't think that's how we should approach age, because it's a natural thing and it's not necessarily all decline and badness. It very much is also more changes. Like we all tend to become more emotional intelligent, actually, not all of us, but statistically we don't so easily get caught up in the negativity. We don't let the negative things take over so quickly. We tend to take a pause before we respond. We're much better at incorporating our experiences. So we might cognitively not be quite as sharp as when we're 20, but we compensate in that way by being able to see patterns and being able to put things together and use our previous experience in that way. So the whole story about it being downhill when you are 50, that's just not true. And that's really what I'm saying when I think we should embrace it. But the problem is that we have said this to each other for so many years, like this whole ageist approach to life, that it's good when you're young, it's bad when you're old. Like anti-aging, the whole term says that aging is a bad thing. And it's so ingrained in us that we're not even aware of it. We say things that we don't realize are ageist. Like for instance, if we forget our keys, we will tell ourselves, oh, that was a senior moment. But that doesn't have to be anything to do with our age necessarily. Like my 16-year-old son has more moments like that, I would say, than I do. And it's just so ingrained in our society. So I think we really need to become aware of that, because we're limiting ourselves and we're limiting each other and society, especially with the changing demographics, where we really need to stay active and contributing for longer. And so we need to challenge that narrative. And that's what I mean by embracing it.
I completely agree with that. And you make a distinction between growing old in your book and getting old. What is the difference there in your view?
Well, we all grow and get old. That's just natural. That's part of life. But we have the choice whether we want to continue to grow. And here I mean mentally. And it could be physically, of course, as well in other ways. So yeah, it's a choice. It's about keeping active mentally and physically, and adapting to the changes that might come our ways.
Okay, that makes lots of sense. And another differentiation you make is between successful aging and aging mindfully. What do you mean by that, and how can mindfulness help us age?
The whole term successful aging is something that really, I think, sets us up for failure. Because what is successful aging? Is that dying? Because we can't stay young, right? So so it's telling us, it's like being told that we're supposed to live our lives in a certain way in order to be successful. And I think that's really wrong, because each one of us have our own way to say what our life should be like and how we want to age. Nobody's going to tell me how I age successfully. So that whole term is we have to get rid of. But I do understand, because of course there's a lot of research done into aging, and as a scientist, you've got to sort of be able to compare interventions before and after, whether it works and whether it does stall our aging process. So that term is coming from a biomedical background, but it's not necessarily something that we can apply to our own individual lives. And sorry, what was your question again? It was
no
successful
worries
aging
at all. No, it was around the differentiation between successful aging and aging mindfully, and what do you mean by that, and also how mindfulness can help us in aging.
Yeah. So what I mean by aging mindfully is first of all, it's awareness. If you Google mindfulness, there's 100 definitions of it out there, and it's hard to put your finger on what mindfulness is. But if I were to put it in one word, it would be awareness, because it gives us this ability to, what I just described when I was on that silent retreat. It gives us an awareness about these innate biologically urges to respond, to react to life in certain ways, because the way that our brains have evolved is all about surviving, and it's not necessarily beneficial for our mental well-being. We know that, we all know that it's not. We have this urge to eat fat food, we have urge to eat sugar, and that's our caveman brain that's urging us to do all of these things, but it's not really good for us in the long run. And most of us are unconscious about a lot of these urges that we have. So for instance, if a typical thing for aging, we all talk a lot about loneliness. So if you are lonely, your caveman brain will do everything it can to keep you safe. So it will tell you, well, it's best if you stay at home, if you don't go out and risk being embarrassed, or risk putting yourself in a situation where you can come into an awkward situation or something like that, be rejected, or what it could be. So your caveman brain is keeping you safe, which is good, but in the long run, it's not really beneficial for your well-being. So when you start to practice mindfulness, you start to notice these patterns, and they are genetically wired in your brain, but it can also be these creations that you have created yourself, these patterns in your brain, these things you've told yourself throughout your life about, it could be things like, I'm not good enough, or I shouldn't behave like that, or the ageist approach, like, and if I'm 50, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't go out and start a new career, I shouldn't, and all these things that we tell ourselves. So we become aware of these patterns of thoughts, and we're able to step back and look at them and go, hello, there you are again. And thank you for keeping me safe. But hang on, this is not really what I want to do. This is not really the life I want to live, or the person I want to be. So I'm choosing to do something else. So the mindfulness gives you a freedom. It gives you freedom to make conscious choices. And that's what I mean by aging mindfully, because and it's not really different. There's no difference really between the techniques I teach when I teach middle-aged people with burnout, or if I teach teenagers, or if I teach people beyond 50. It's the same skills. It's life skills that we can learn to step back and see all the things that's going on in our mind and in our bodies, and then making conscious choices. It's just different situations that we apply them to, but it's a life skill. And And I would say the earlier we start to practice this, the better, because it's like any new skill. It's playing a violin or learning to play soccer or anything. It takes practice, and we gotta make mistakes, and we gotta keep at it again and again and again. The more we do it, the better we become at it, and eventually, that's also what some research says, is people who really meditate for a long time, and here we're actually talking not me, people meditate even more, it becomes a trait. You can see it in scans of their brains, that they the areas that's associated with compassion, for instance, is much thicker there, and you can tell that they have been doing things. So yeah, that's what I mean by living and aging mindfully, I would say.
Yeah, and I think that's reflected, that's what we're all about on Restless as well, is really championing this transitional life phase from 50 onwards, where actually it's a time of real opportunity for lots of people to whether they do something different or explore and expand. So it's very much what we're about as well. Can I remind everyone who's joined, and thank you and welcome to those that didn't hear my earlier message, but please feel free to post your questions in the chat box. Berit would be delighted to hear from you and to answer your questions as well. So just going back to your book, you talk a lot throughout the book about a mindfulness-based framework for aging. And it would be really great, and I have been going through the chapters, so I've had some exposure to this, but if you can briefly explain what that framework is.
Yeah, so it's the word embrace, really, that it's built around, and there's two parts to it. So at either end of the word embrace, there's an E, and that E, and I actually don't know if you can see it, I have the book here. Can you see that? Yeah, it's the E there. And
yes.
Yeah, and in there are those E's are to be seen as sort of the basic mindfulness skill that we continuously need to do in order to be able to pay attention and to become aware. Because mindfulness, in order to be aware, you first need to pay attention, and attention is something that our culture is not very good at cultivating in us, with all these computers and constantly being disturbed, and we are supposed to multitask and all of that. So we are actually teaching our brains at the moment to not pay attention and not sustain our attention for very long. So it's a skill that we got to practice. And actually I have this snowball here that illustrates it very well. When you do like this, that's usually how our brains look, right? Do you recognize that? It's all busy in there. But what happens if you take the time to put this down on the table? Eventually this will fall to the bottom and things become a little bit clearer and you start to see things. And it's the same thing we practice with this E. So we notice it, we note it, and then we start to know it. So this notice it, know it, notice it, note it, and know it it's a skill that we can become better at in everything we do in life. So we notice that, for instance, there's an urge to drink. I notice that feeling thirsty. How does that feel like? And then eventually I also start to notice these patterns of thoughts. I see the things that's happening in my mind, and then I start to be able to label them as maybe this thought that I have told myself throughout my life that I'm not good enough. So those things, notice, note it, and know it is the first skill. And that's the E, and we continuously do that. And in between there, once we have this awareness, then we can start to respond to things in a different way than what our instinct tells us to do, what our initial reaction is. And that can be, so that's the M, and I've also got that in here. Just put this. Yeah, that's very small, actually. The embrace. Yeah, you can't really. Yeah, you can see it. Yeah. So the M stands for mindset. So that's our perspective. And just the knowledge that we are able to change this perspective gives us a lot of power, because just knowing that we can change this ageist thing that we have been taught throughout our life, we can change that, and we can see aging as something adventurous and positive instead of seeing it as something bad. That's the mindset. And then the BR is for broadening out. And that's really what I was explaining earlier on when I was saying how when I was at the silent retreat, I was able to broaden out my attention. So it was not focused on the things that was causing me difficulty, but being able to see what else is here in this moment. There is a nice sound there, birds are singing, there's nice sunshine, there's warmth in my hands, there is nice compassion between the people I'm sitting with. All of these things are there as well. So I'm broadening out. And what happens then is a bit like, if you imagine that you have a coffee cup and you accidentally put a tablespoon of salt in it. So if that coffee cup is like a little tiny espresso cup, that salt will be really, really taking over the taste, and you won't be able to enjoy your coffee so much. But if you are imagining that instead of this tiny little coffee cup, you have one of those soup bowls that you have in the industrial kitchens, a teaspoon of salt in there, it's still there. It might still cause things you don't really like, but it's not as strong. And we can do the same thing. So we can train our attention to not focus on just that little thing that's the matter right now, and instead saying, okay, what else is here right now? And being able to hold the pleasant and the unpleasant together in the same moment. And that's really helping a lot. And then the A is for affection, which is self-compassion, because we need it. It's tough getting old. It's tough having to cope with the things that we cannot do anymore. It's hard to deal with any challenges in life. And if we meet them with this inner critical voice saying, oh, you stupid idiot, why did you do that? Or because we tend to treat ourselves really badly. If we treated our friends the way we treat ourselves, we wouldn't have any friends. So, but again, that's a skill. We can change that. We can become much better. We can start to talk nicely to ourselves, and that will help our well-being, and it will make us much more resilient and able to deal with the challenges that comes our way. And then the last thing is the C, and that's for committed action, because this is a thing that I often get when I'm out talking mindfulness, is people say, how can you change the world by sitting on a mat at home alone and meditating? And to a point, they're right. Of course, we have to go out and these realizations and this awareness that we gain on the mat, we have to, of course, also carry them out into changes in life. So we have to commit, and we have to adapt. And so that is the last part of my embrace framework. It's to commit to changes and looking around and saying, okay, so I can't do this anymore, but what else can I do that still gives me pleasure and that still gives me satisfaction and allows me to contribute and give me a purpose in life. Okay. And then it finishes with the E, again.
Yeah. That's great, and thank you. That's made it really, really clear, and a sort of an easy guide for us as well. So I know we talked about mindfulness, obviously, and probably lots of us have tried it, myself, several times. And so it can be challenging, and I know it takes practice and patience. But what are some of the obstacles that people need to be prepared for when they start meditating and becoming more mindful, and how do you recommend they deal with them? Well, I think we've covered that a little bit with the framework that you've talked us through, but what are the sort of obstacles that people should be prepared for?
Well, back to the caveman brain, really. It's we have been, it's not just the genetics, but also the way we're brought up in our culture is that we need to strive, we need to fix something, we need to do something, achieving all the time, and that's not always helping us. Because what I'm asking people to do when I ask them to sit still and do nothing, it goes against the whole way that our brain is wired and the whole cultural way that we've been taught in our lives. So when we have challenges, of course, our caveman brain will try to find a solution, which is great because that's what has brought us to the state we're in our lives now. We can solve problems and we can make things better for ourselves and lives. But there's some things that we can't change with doing, and we have to just be. And I think when you sit there and meditate, and I've been there myself, you're sitting there and thinking, why am I sitting here? And your brain will come up with a million things that you should go out and do instead that will improve your life and that will make things. And it's so hard to convince that brain to say, yeah, but I'm actually doing something good here and it will pay off eventually, because you don't see it immediately. It takes a little while. You see the effect of calming down and de-stressing and calming down the nervous system. You see that immediately. So it has a huge benefit on that. But the awareness, it takes a little bit longer to get there. But it comes. It's so whenever you feel that you're not doing it right, or your mindfulness is not just me, I just can't do it, and you give up, then say, but this is natural. Everybody goes through this. Because we are really we're rebelling against the way that we have evolved. That's basically what we're doing. We are going against what our brains are wired to do. So and then the self-compassion and the patience, and just remind yourself that this is something that's good. And there's so much research that says it. So I can tell you it, but it helps to know that nowadays, like when they were doing it in the East and where it came from originally, mindfulness, they didn't actually have any research that said it. But now we know that it will change. It does literally go in and change the way that our brains are hardwired. So it just takes patience. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's fantastic to know that it can make such an enormous difference to people's brains and perception of the world as well. And I think definitely we can all relate to that feeling that it's hard sometimes to sit still for a while, that urge to be doing, and I must do this and I must do that. So, yeah.
I often explain it as this might actually be a good image of things. So when you meditate in the beginning, you can imagine that this is like, heartbeat. They go like that, right? So when you start meditating and you are saying, okay, I'm focusing on my breath right now. And then eventually your brain will go somewhere and it will say, oh, I should have done this. And why didn't I should go where? And you think, and then eventually you say, oh, hang on, I'm supposed to be meditating. And you go back and you focus on your breath. And then it comes up and go on somewhere else. And sometimes you might even sit up here for 10 minutes and, oh, hang on, I just went on a nice daydream, but I'm supposed to meditate. And then you go back again. And that's normal. We all do that in the beginning. But what happens when you continue to do it is that you catch yourself quicker. So you go back quicker. And there's going to be more period here where you're down here before it goes up.
Yeah.
So it's natural. That's the way we all do it.
Thank you. So I don't know if you can see the book, but the subheadline of the book is a mindfulness-based framework for the longevity revolution. I'm never quite sure if it's longevity or longevity, but we'll go with longevity. Can you tell us a bit about the longevity revolution?
Well, I think
what is it even?
Well, it's the fact that we are all getting older, that we're all living for longer, and that our society is changing. So what used to be like a pyramid where you had a lot of young people and not so many old people is now more sort of like this shape. So there are more old people, not so many in the bottom, and depending, of course, in the country, but it's globally. So we have a lot of older people, and there's more and more of us, and we're going to stay here for longer, and we're going to stay healthier for longer now, which is lucky. But of course, our society have to change, and our systems have to change, and the way that we do life. This whole phase of having a time where we study and learn, time where we work, and then a time where we finally get to rest when we retire, that we have to mix up, because we cannot financially support the society that we have if we don't make a change, but our well-being is not benefiting from it either. And we're seeing, you can see the amount of people in Restless that's interested in staying active and engaged in life for a long time. There is definitely a desire there to do it as well. But what I'm saying is that we can do a lot on a system, on sort of as a society, but deep down, in order to change this, we have to change our attitude towards it, because we are the people who's going to make the change. So we have to be aware of the things that's limiting us. What is it that's limiting me from starting a new career when I'm 60, for instance? What is it that's stopping me from doing the things that's important to me? Is it me, or is it just some idea I have up in my mind that I can maybe change and challenge because it's important to me? And that's what I mean by the mindfulness approach, because I think all change comes from within, and I think we are the ones that have to make that change, as well as society and the way that it's set up in political system as well, of course. Yeah. And I would love for us to see this demographical change as a catalyst for improving our lives throughout life. So we see so much burnout in the middle of the life, because people are so stressed and overworked. But what if we started to maybe combine those three a little bit, so that you study for a bit and you work, and then maybe you go back to studying, or maybe you have a little break and you do something else, and then you continue, because then when you're in your 60s and your 70s, you are not exhausted from living such a busy life, and you can continue for a bit longer. And not only does that benefit society, but it will also benefit you, because you have purpose, you have things to contribute with. And in all research about well-being, it all comes down to feeling that you have a purpose in life. If you don't feel that there is a meaning in your life, there's nothing to live for, and so you're not happy. So we have to somehow combine those, and I think that this demographical change could be the catalyst for that.
Yeah. And I just think, do you think overall and generally with this demographical shift that over the years, do you think attitudes to aging are changing? Certainly on Restless, we try to reflect the fact that they're changing. I'm not sure maybe 30 years ago that Restless would be the same size as it is now, reflecting that sort of transitional life phase where people do go back. They may take a gap year. We do case studies of people going back to university, or changing careers, or doing what you've done at the age of 50, publishing your first book. But do you think societally our attitudes are changing to aging, from your experience?
Yeah, I think so. But again, it's hard to tell, because in the circles that I'm in, of course, yeah, I see it too. Yes. So I don't know if it's the same outside of that, really. Yeah, I don't know.
That might be one.
Yeah.
If any members have any
Yeah,
opinions on that,
maybe.
it would
Yeah.
really, really good to hear. I think certainly we would agree with that. I think that it is changing. And people are looking for different things as they approach and go beyond their midlife than a number of years ago.
Sure.
So I've heard it said that people naturally become more mindful as they age, just naturally without sort of having a practice. Do you think this is true? And do you think therefore that a mindfulness practice becomes less challenging as we age? I'm not looking for an easy route, by the way. I'm just interested to know if that's true.
I think I don't know. I think it's a very personal thing. I think it comes easier to some people than to others, for sure.
Right.
But you do see research that people tend to focus more on the things that matters to them than when they get older, because they know it probably, and they've been through a lot. So I do think that in itself is more mindful, because you don't so easily get caught up in the little things that's annoying in life. But whether everybody gets more mindful, I don't know. I think that's hard. Yeah.
It's probably a massive generalization, but I have heard it.
Yeah.
So if the people who've joined us here tonight would like to start living more mindfully, what is the one thing that you would suggest that they start doing? Even one small change that we could all make that would start to make a difference in our lives?
I think is to take pauses deliberately. So take a time where you say, now for the next 5 minutes, I am going to notice my body, what's happening in my body, notice what emotions are here, and notice what thoughts are here. And it's really the mindfulness loop that I was talking about. So notice what's happening, and starting to note it, to label it. So I'm feeling tired. That's noted. And then know it once you start to seeing these patterns, because like a day just go by, and you sometimes lie in bed and go, whoa, that was another day gone, where you didn't actually take time out to truly be. I sometimes say that we have become human doings instead of human beings. We're forgetting that we should both stop and smell the roses along the way. Like, really, if we don't step out of automatic pilot, because most of us live in automatic pilot all the time. We're just so busy doing the to-do lists, or thinking about the next thing or what happened earlier, that we don't stop and really enjoy the moments. But also, whenever things are painful or unpleasant, to stop and be curious and say, okay, I notice that my knee is giving me trouble today. So how am I reacting to that? What's my mind saying? What kind of thoughts does that lead to? What emotions are here because of this knee? And how does it actually physically feel in the knee? Is it actually pain, or is it just me labeling it as pain and wanting to run away from it? Because that's what we do. We run away from, that's again our hard wiring, because pain and discomfort is associated with danger. So that's what we will do. Our caveman brain will run away from it. But sometimes if we can actually approach it and and allow it to be there with a curiosity and self-compassion, saying it's okay to feel like this. We all have difficulties from time to time in our lives. It's normal. It's part of being a human being. Then you can approach these things and you don't add to the suffering. So in mindfulness, and also in my book, I'm talking about primary suffering and secondary suffering. And primary suffering is all these things that we cannot avoid. That's life happening to us. But all the secondary suffering is all the thoughts and emotions that we attach to it. All these thoughts about why did I get that? And I don't want it. And all the thoughts about what if this gets worse? And oh my God, and self-blame, blaming our partner, blaming the dog, whatever. All these things that we add to our suffering, that creates extra suffering that we don't have to have. And if we're able to stop that, and we are able to stop it, if we just become aware of it first, then we can respond and saying, this is taking me away, I don't want to go. Okay, back to what you asked about, the brief thing that we could do, the pauses. Take pauses and just start to notice, curiously thinking, hey, what if I was experiencing this body today for the very first time? What if I was experiencing this life for the very first time? This thought patterns in my mind, these things, and just curiously starting to become aware, stepping out of automatic
Thank
pilot.
you. Yeah, thank you. That's great advice. So I'd missed a couple of comments here. Ruth, thank you for your comment in relation to my suggestion that maybe mindfulness it gets less challenging as we get older. Ruth has said, I'd have to say no to that one. I'm 67 and still have to rein myself in while meditating. So I think in a way it's slightly wishful thinking on my part. So thanks for that comment, Ruth. And a message as well from Jane. How do I manage other people who are struggling with me changing now and becoming more authentic to myself and my own values? I find others don't like the change in me now. I'm letting go and being more mindful. I don't collude anymore. I find this very difficult and feel isolated sometimes. That is a really great question. And actually, I think that would be a common experience when people change, is how it affects the relationship with others. So yeah, it'd be really great to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I wished I had the answer to that, but there again, as in anything, there's no easy answer to that. I think the way to approach it is just to be talking about it to the people who's not liking it, and explaining it to them what is happening and why it's happening, and maybe they can't cope with that, maybe not. But then sometimes we're just going to have to look for other circles where we are appreciated for that new person that we are becoming, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was enough
for that
answer. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that, and you know, I think that's very true. It's hard to answer that one
because we
ways.
can't change other people. We can only change ourselves. So that's the problem.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So just this is interesting from, I suppose, often we find that something that interests our members is how you get started writing a book and what that writing process is. So Aging Upwards, you mentioned earlier that you are just turned 50. Aging Upwards is your first book, which is fantastic and just great and inspiring for all of us to know that you can turn your hand to something new no matter what age. Yeah, it'd be great to know, is this something that bubbled away for years? Have you always sort of thought you might write a book? And what was your writing process when you actually did get started?
Yeah, I think I've always had the desire to it, but I think we all do. We all, isn't that the saying is that we all have a book in us, right? And we just have to sit down and
Yeah.
write it. Yeah. So I think COVID definitely helped me. It kicked me in the butt and told me that there was your opportunity, and so I jumped at it. And I think the passion, I think I really have something that I wanted to share with the world. This what I saw, this change in these women that I was teaching, and how much it helped them, and I myself, how much it helped me. I just think that that's something that we should share. I felt like it gave me purpose and meaning, and I had to do it. And then of course I was met every day. I sat down to write. I was met with these doubtful thoughts, thinking, wow, you're not good enough, you don't have what it takes, can you really do this? And that's when my mindfulness practice then helped, because I could say, yeah, thank you, brain, for trying to keep me out of embarrassment, but I'm choosing to do it anyway because it's important to me. So I think that's what kept me going.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And it is inspiring. I do believe it's inspiring. Carlos said, and thank you, Carlos, if you haven't left yet. Thanks for joining us this evening. Carlos says, have to go. Can't wait to read my copy, which arrived today. So that's great. And I confess I'm still going through mine, but I'm enjoying it so much. And I'm learning so much from it as well. But it's been really great to hear you talk us through it too. So out of interest, how difficult was it to get your first book published? Or because you're tackling a topic that I guess I've seen how many references you have in the back of the book. It's a huge body of research that you've done. So there's not too many books like it out there in the world. So, but did you find it difficult as a first-time author to get published, or was that relatively straightforward for you?
Well, I actually chose to go with what's called a hybrid publisher. So I don't know if that actually made it any easier or not, because they of course still have to choose who they want to publish. But it means that I have more rights on my book, and I also get more revenue from it. But I paid them. I paid for their services to help me get the book published as well, and to help me promote it. So there are lots today. The publishing market is changing so much, and we can do it. We can all go out and do it. Even if I didn't get a publisher, I think I would have done it, just self-published it somehow, which would have been hard because it's a whole new. I don't know how to get a book out there. It's a new area, but I think I would have known somehow and just felt my way.
I think I can say with confidence you would have managed it somehow. And it is such a it's such a powerful book, and I think incredibly helpful as well. I'm going to put it out there one more time to the members. If you have any questions, please do ask Berit. Thanks, Jackie. Well done, Berit, and thank you, Restless. This was great, and loving reading your book. Fantastic. And enjoying the downloadable recordings. My greatest takeaway is the importance of self-compassion as I get older. Fantastic. Thanks, Jackie. That is something I think that we all need to practice too, is that self-compassion.
For sure. Yes.
So, and Ronnie, thank you so much. Really inspiring. I'm 76 and I've had numerous physical challenges and deficits over the last decade. Mindfulness has helped me so much. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. This is great. So I'm getting, I know it's only a few people commenting, but there obviously people are trying mindfulness and are benefiting enormously from it as well. Can I ask if there's any more planned books, or is this enough to be going on with for the moment? I imagine your life has changed a lot since it's launched, including doing things like this. and being on podcasts and so forth. But have you any more plans, or is this it for now?
No, I actually enjoyed writing the book. I really enjoyed it. So what the topic's going to be, I don't know. But yes, it's not the last one. I would love to continue doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully when you do the next one, we can have you back here on Restless one more time as well. That will be great. So if there's not any more questions, I just would like to thank you all so much for joining us this evening. And thanks so much to Berit for joining us and answering our questions and my questions. It's been so enjoyable and incredibly interesting as well, and helpful. Thanks as always to our members for joining us too, and for the questions that you shared with us and the comments. We hope you enjoyed the event as much as we all did. So please remember, everyone who signed up to this event will receive 25% discount on Berit's book when you purchase it. If you'd like to leave a review for the event, please feel free to do so. And as I mentioned at the start, the event has been recorded, so if you want to tune in again if you missed any of it, please do so. The next book club event is on Friday at 3 p.m. with TM Logan talking about his new book, The Curfew. So please join us then too. And now all there is for me to do is to say, have a really lovely evening, everyone. And once the event closes down, it closes down for everyone, unfortunately, just for anyone who might have wanted to stay on for a chat. But thanks everyone once again, and particular thanks to Berit. I think I can speak for everyone in saying we really enjoyed it. Very interesting presentation. Thank you, Linda, and thanks, Jane. So yeah, lovely comments. Thank you all, and have a lovely rest of the evening. And thanks once again to Berit. And good luck with the book. I know you're already a bestseller. So where do you go from there? But yeah, I hope it does really, really well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me tonight. I really enjoyed it. And if anybody has any questions, you are more than welcome to send me an email. It's just berit@thrivinglife.eu if you want to ask me something, or feel free.
Great. I'm going to actually pop that in here. So it's Berit at Thriving Life. Sorry, can you say that again?
Thriving Life.
.eu.
Yes.
So I'll just pop that in and I'll leave it there for a minute. Berit at Thriving Life. I'm beginning to wonder if I was saying your name correctly through all of that, but
no, you're right.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, great. Feel free to message Berit, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your evenings. Thank you very much. Good night. Bye.
Good night.